السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا حبيبي يا رسول الله صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم. All praise is due to Allah, the Creator, the Sustainer. Peace, blessings and salutations upon the greatest of His creation, Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam. Alhamdulillah, we started off with the major event in Islamic history, with one of the major events, which is the Battle of Uhud. And inshallah, we will continue from where we left. And just to remind ourselves that we left at the part of our discussion where the kuffar had lost and began to flee to the mountains, accompanied by the woman who had left from Makkah for the battle as well. And at that time, the Muslims were victorious. But there was a sudden change in the war. And we will start our discussion with that. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, seeing the retreat of the disbelievers and the victory of the Muslims, the division of archers which we learnt in the past part of this chapter, who were kept at that narrow road in the mountain, that division of the archers, which was previously posted by Rasulullah Sallallahu ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam, those archers began to say to one another that let's take the war booty, we've won. And they were proclaiming that they've won, but they were not remembering the command of Rasulullah Sallallahu ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam, which was that in any situation, do not move from this place until the message is sent by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to them. That was the command by the Prophet of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But those archers began to say to one another that let's take the war booty, we've won. And the leader in charge of them, we had learned, was Abdullah ibn Jubair radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who tried to make them understand the order of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he also warned them of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's disobedience. But the archers, however, paid no attention to him and proceeded to amass the war booty, thinking that they have won the war. And that was the situation until these archers had decided so. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, whilst this was occurring, an officer of the kuffar, Khalid bin Walid, was watching this scene from the height of the mountains. And upon seeing the narrow road no more guarded by the archers, he gathered an army and immediately attacked the Muslims from behind via that same narrow road which was now unguarded. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, you must know, I did mention that to learn further in this war of what happens, we have to keep in mind the first and the second part. And in that first part, we learned that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam commanded the archers, do not move until I say so. But these archers were busy in collecting the war booty. As Abdullah bin Jubair, as well as certain other diligent soldiers, attempted to interrupt this invasion as best as they could, but unfortunately, Allahu Akbar, all had become shaheed because the other archers had left, and the way was now clear for Khalid bin Walid to seize the Muslims from the rear. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had told them to stay there and not to leave that narrow road. But Khalid bin Walid has now seen, and he comes to seize the Muslims from the rear. Seeing this, the army of the kuffar returned again to fight, and you must know that they had lost and began to flee, but now they are returning back. and they have seen that now this way is open, and they return back to fight with the Muslims who are unfortunately engrossed in acquiring the war booty. The believers, the Muslims turn to see an assault on them, and after looking forward again, Allahu Akbar, the Muslims found themselves to be hounded by the kuffar army, Allahu Akbar, being surrounded. Panic arose amongst them, and now no differentiation could be made between fellow soldiers from the Muslim army and the soldiers of the kuffar. There was no differentiation which could be made between the Muslims and the non-Muslims, to the extent that the Muslims were attacked by Muslims, Allahu Akbar. As a result, Hazrat Yaman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the father of Hazrat Huzaifa radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was made shaheed by a Muslim sword, Allahu Akbar. Hazrat Huzaifa screamed, Muslims, he's my father, Muslims, he's my father. But in this strange, sudden and uncontrollable fear, none could understand what was being said. And as mentioned, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, in this manner, Hazrat Yaman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was made shaheed by a sword of a Muslim. But let us summarize what we just learned, that this sudden change happened in the war. Rasulullah Sallallahu, Alaihi Wasallam commanded those archers not to move, and they disobeyed Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. For a moment, let's take an example of our lives today and ask ourselves that, brothers and sisters in Islam, how many of us in our daily lives are disobeying Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? How many of us are not following the command of Allah and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Nearly every day of our lives we do one action which is against the Islamic laws, which is against the command of Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Without comparison, we can see that those archers disobeyed Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and they were kept at that path, that they should not move from there. Why? Because that narrow road could be used by the kuffar to attack from behind. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, let us answer this question, that are we not disobeying Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam nearly every day of our lives? Are we not finding ourselves in that situation? Without comparison, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, because of their disobeying Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we can see that those 50 archers were there, and they were placed there to guard that narrow road so that the army should not, the kuffar should not attack from behind. But because they disobeyed, so many companions were made shaheed. Allahu Akbar. So many companions had to leave this world because of not listening to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, today we as the Muslim Ummah face so many difficulties and problems because we do not obey Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May Allah guide us all to follow the command of Allah and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Hazrat Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu ta'ala anhu, we learned that he was the flag bearer of the Muslim army, and Hazrat Mus'ab bin Umair was sadly attacked by a kafir named Ibn Qamiyya, who struck the right hand of Mus'ab radiallahu ta'ala anhu with such force that it completely separated from the body of Hazrat Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu ta'ala anhu and fell to the ground. Allahu Akbar. The Sahabi then hastened to hold the flag with his left hand. Why? Because this was the flag of the Muslims. He was the flag bearer of the Muslims. And when Ibn Qamiyya also made that hand shaheed, Allahu Akbar, he has lost both his hands, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. Hazrat Mus'ab radiallahu ta'ala anhu then held the flag to his chest whilst using his face. He stood tall in this condition and loudly recited the following verse of the Quran: وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. And Muhammad Sallallahu ta'ala Alaihi Wasallam is a messenger. There have been many other messengers before him. Allahu Akbar. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, this was the verse of the Holy Quran recited by the Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu ta'ala anhu while standing tall in this condition and loudly reciting, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. And Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam is a messenger. There have been many other messengers before him. Is the understanding what we learn from the verse of the Holy Quran, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. Ibn Qamiyah is the one who struck the right hand out of the body of Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Then he struck the left hand, and now Ibn Qamiyah shot an arrow towards Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu ta'ala anhu, making him shaheed. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And this companion was that companion who had a great speciality, and the speciality in him was that he used to physically resemble with Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. But the kuffar took an advantage of this resemblance, and the kuffar saw him falling towards the ground, and they spread this false rumor that Allah forbid Muhammad has been killed. Allahu Akbar. Hearing this, now the Muslims lost control of themselves and began to turn away from the battlefield, including the many brave and courageous amongst them. And this false rumor caused the Muslims to be split into three factions, and the three factions were: some fled and reached within close proximity to Medina, whilst others were shocked and remained where they were. They were either fighting offensively or trying to save their lives. And the last was a group of the group which numbered to 12 individuals who remained steadfast, and they were those who were guarding Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, this was surely a situation which the Muslims were facing with the false rumor of the kuffar that astaghfirullah, ma'azallah, Allah forbid, Muhammad has been killed. In this situation, the Muslims have now been split into three factions, some fleeing and leaving and reaching within close proximity to Medina, whilst others remaining shocked and remaining where they were, and the other either fighting offensively or they were trying to save their lives, while the third was the last group which numbered in 12, and they remained steadfast. They were those who were guarding Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. In this panic, there were some who had completely given up hope, and even those who were prepared to sacrifice their lives. They were prepared to sacrifice their lives fighting, became ensnared by the disbelievers. Allahu Akbar. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, understand that there were some who had completely given up hope, and even those who were prepared to sacrifice their lives fighting became ensnared by the disbelievers. Allahu Akbar. And where was the beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam? What condition was he in? No one knew. Whilst fighting very bravely, the lion of Allah, Seerah Khuda Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, turned to see Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, but he didn't, and which resulted in him becoming saddened, distracted and anxious. Hazrat Anas ibn Nadr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the uncle of Hazrat Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, was fighting through the kuffar ranks and noticed a few Muslims sitting hopelessly and not in battle. He approached them and inquired as to the reason behind this, and was told that the person whom we were fighting for is now shaheed. Allahu Akbar, astaghfirullah, ma'azallah. Such a false rumor causing this situation, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. Hazrat Anas ibn Nadr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, hearing this, then said that if truly Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam has become shaheed, then what is life without him? Come, let us go into the battle and join Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam in martyrdom. Allahu Akbar. Hazrat Anas ibn Nadr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, subhanallah, saying such beautiful words that he is encouraging the others that what is life without Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Surely, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, today the aqidah of the Ahlul Sunnah is that the Prophet of Allah is alive. That is why the Shaykh says कि तू ज़िंदा है वल्लाह तू ज़िंदा है चश्मे आलम से छुप जाने वाले मेरे चश्मे आलम से छुप जाने वाले. Imam Ahmad Raza says that Wallah, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is alive, and we can see that today we cannot physically see Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala guide us the love for Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Ke Ya Allah, Ya O Allah, grant us the ability and grant us that chance that we may see Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Subhanallah, and it's surely a sight which will change our lives, inshallah. May Allah grant us that opportunity. But my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, Hazrat Anas ibn Nadr radiallahu ta'ala anhu and the other companions are facing this situation. Why? Because they can't see Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. But they are encouraging each other, as we saw Hazrat Anas ibn Nadr, that what is life without him? Come, let us go into the battlefield to join Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam in martyrdom. And he further moved directly towards the enemies, and he fought very passionately until even he was made shaheed. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. But my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, his body was inspected after the battle, and it was found to have had more than 80 injuries caused by sword, arrow and spear, which had hurt his body mercilessly by the kuffar. Allahu Akbar. And it would pierce his body mercilessly by the kuffar. None could recognize his body as Anas ibn Nadr radiallahu ta'ala anhu in the love, Allahu Akbar, for Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he sacrificed. He did not know where the Prophet of Allah was, and he says, what is life without him? And he goes and he fights passionately. 80 injuries caused by sword, arrow and spear piercing his body. Allahu Akbar. And this was mercilessly done by the kuffar, but no one could recognize Hazrat Anas ibn Nadr radiallahu ta'ala anhu's body. But there was one person who recognized, and that was his sister, who recognized Hazrat Anas ibn Nadr radiallahu ta'ala anhu by his fingers. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, similarly, as Thabit ibn Wahda radiallahu ta'ala anhu said to a group of Ansaris that, oh Ansaris, even if the Prophet has been made shaheed, Allah has not, so lift your weapons and fight for the deen of your Lord. He and some other Ansaris, Hazrat Thabit ibn Wahda radiallahu ta'ala anhu and other Ansaris, began to fight the kuffar. And they were fighting so bravely. But as Thabit ibn Wahda radiallahu ta'ala anhu eventually became shaheed at the sword of Khalid ibn Walid. Allahu Akbar. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, such a situation which was faced by the people, that they were only worried to see Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. But the Muslims fought fearlessly in their respective places as the war progressed. Yet all were keen to see the blessed face of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And how do they see? Allahu Akbar. In this state of despair, the first fortunate Sahabi to see the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was Hazrat Ka'b ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala, who proclaimed, Allahu Akbar, this was a situation of happiness for the Muslims, that, oh Muslims, come, here's Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. A new life had come into the believers upon hearing this, and they rushed to where the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam was. But my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, this false rumor caused so many companions to give their lives for the sake of Allah and His beloved Habib Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. But the kuffar could not see this, and they intensified their onslaught and persisted in making Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam ma'azallah shaheed. And every plan of theirs, my brothers and sisters, every plan of theirs was forged by Zulfiqar, the sword of Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, you must know that now the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, when Hazrat Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu ta'ala anhu, due to resemblance, the kuffar had spread the false rumor that he had ma'azallah been made shaheed. But now Hazrat Ka'b ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu showed the Muslims where Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam was. But during this time, the disbelievers were close to assaulting Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And because they were close to assaulting him, it resulted and caused Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam to say that who is prepared to sacrifice their life for me? Allahu Akbar. Such a situation and such a question by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Today, if we have to proclaim without comparison who is ready to sacrifice their lives for the sake of salah, to go and perform their salah, who is ready to sacrifice their time, my fellow brothers, to just correct that statement, that who is ready to sacrifice their time for the sake of salah, which we fail as the Muslim ummah today. We fail to perform our 5 times salah, but the Prophet of Allah is asking in that situation that they were close to assaulting him, who is prepared to sacrifice their life for me? Allahu Akbar. We as the Muslims are called 5 times to the house of Allah, to the masjid, and we don't attend. Allahu Akbar. May Allah guide us to sacrifice time for the sake of Islam, and may Allah guide us to sacrifice our lives also for the sake of Islam, as we can see that those companions did not see their family, did not see wealth, but they saw the love for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and gave it utmost priority. May Allah guide us all the love, and may Allah keep us steadfast on the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'at. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has asked this question, and this is a question which we should ask ourselves, that are we prepared to even sacrifice our time? Here it's of life and death, my brothers and sisters. He is asking that who is prepared to sacrifice their life for me? As Ziyad ibn Sikhan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu heard this and gathered 5 Ansaris to fend off the kuffar and drive them away from Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. But Hazrat Ziyad ibn Sikhan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was greatly injured whilst fighting, and the companion fell to the ground and was almost made shaheed. But listen to this, Allahu Akbar. He still retained few breaths of his life within him. When Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam ordered that his body be brought in front of him, after being so, Hazrat Ziyad ibn Sikhan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was able to move his body. Listen to this, brothers. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. Hazrat Ziyad ibn Sikhan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was able to move his body and placed his head at the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. मैं सो जाऊँ या मुस्तफ़ा कहते कहते, खुले आँख सल्ले आला कहते कहते. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. Such a situation that he was blessed with martyrdom and shahadat at the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. As Ziyad ibn Sikhan, such a beautiful shahadat he had. May Allah guide us, and may Allah grant us the opportunity to have such a death in Medina, inshallah. That is why the Shair says, Ke na daulat de, na sarwat de, mujhe bas ye saadat de, tere qadmon में मर जाऊँ मैं रो रो के मदीने में तेरे कदमों में मर जाऊँ मैं रो रो के मदीने में बुला लो फिर मुझे शायद रोबे मदीने में. Subhanallah, may Allah grant us such a death in Medina, inshallah. What is this world, brothers and sisters? What are we going to achieve? Nothing. Let us obey the command of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Continuing, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, we learned of Ziyad ibn Sikhan, subhanallah, such a beautiful shahadat. But in this fighting, a brave Muslim stood up and began to eat dates with no concern for the kuffar. And he suddenly stepped forward to Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam and asked that, O Prophet of Allah, if I become shaheed right now, where shall be my destination? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is asked this question and he replied that assuredly you'll enter Jannah. Subhanallah. The companions had no greed for this dunya. They wanted the hereafter. May Allah guide us to follow the footsteps of the companions. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, the companion immediately hastened towards and rushed towards the mushriks and sent them to Jahannam, fighting successfully until he himself became a shaheed. Allahu Akbar. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Subhanallah. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, ye dunya kya hai? What are we going to take? Look at the lives of the companions that we today are chasing behind something which is of no use, but the companions were asking of Jannah. They were asking for paradise. Look at this incident which I am to mention. Allahu Akbar. A disabled Sahabi who is disabled, my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. Hazrat Amr ibn Jamu Ansari radiallahu ta'ala anhu was a disabled companion who made the following dua when he was exiting his house before the battle to say that, Oh Allah, do not grant me return to my family from the war. His 4 sons, Hazrat Amr ibn Jamu radiallahu ta'ala anhu is a disabled companion and he says, Allahu Akbar, subhanallah. He's leaving his family. He's leaving this dunya and going in the path of Allah, subhanallah. And he says that, Oh Allah, do not grant me return to my family from the war. His 4 sons were also present with him in jihad. People had stopped him from joining the battle as he was disabled. But nevertheless, Hazrat Amr ibn Jamu Ansari radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, and submitted to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by saying that, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, allow me to participate in the war as this disabled one desires to enter Jannah as a shaheed. Subhanallah. And we know the status of the shaheed. Allahu Akbar. The Quran has mentioned it. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ وَلَا تَقُولُوا, and do not say, وَلَا تقولوا في سبيل الله أموات, those who have died in the path of Allah, who have passed away in the path of Allah, that they are dead, but بل أحياء, but they are alive, ولكن لا تشعرون, but you do not know. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. This is just a verse. If the shuhada are alive, surely the anbiya have a higher status than the shuhada, the martyrs. If the shuhada can be alive, without doubt this is a separate topic on its own. But the Prophet of Allah, to zinda hai wallah, to zinda hai wallah, the anbiya alayhimus salatu was salam are surely alive, and that is the aqidah of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaat. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, we know we learn from this one ayah only in regard to the status of the shuhada, and we can have numerous ayats and verses which will tell us the excellence of a shaheed. But he is saying that, Ya Rasulullah, that Amr ibn Jamu radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who is disabled, is saying that, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, allow me to participate in the war as this disabled one desires to enter in Jannah as a shaheed. Subhanallah. Hearing this passionate plea, Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam granted him permission. Hazrat Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu could not contain the bliss of this and fought the mushrikeen with his son by his side. And Hazrat Abu Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu states that I saw Hazrat Amr ibn Jamu as he entered the battlefield. Oath on Allah. As he entered, he says, Hazrat Abu Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu states that I saw Hazrat Amr ibn Jamu as he entered the battlefield. Oath on Allah, I crave Jannah. I heard him say, both father and son fought the mushrikeen with much zeal until both passed away as shaheeds. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. We can learn from Hazrat Abu Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu, is stating that I saw Hazrat Amr ibn Jamu as he entered the battlefield. Oath on Allah, I crave Jannah. I heard him saying, Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, is what Hazrat Abu Talha is narrating to us. And both father and son fought the mushrikeen with much zeal but passed away. Brothers and sisters, disabled companion, Allahu Akbar, is ready to sacrifice his life. We as Muslims fail to sacrifice our time. May Allah guide us all. The wife of Hazrat Amr ibn Jamu radiallahu ta'ala anhu, whose name radiallahu ta'ala anha anha, the wife of Hazrat Amr ibn Jamur radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was Hind, later brought a camel after the battle, on which she placed the body of her husband, brother and son to be buried in Medina. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, understand that she brought a camel after the battle, on which she placed the body of her husband, brother and son to be buried in Medina. It is not an easy sight to see your husband, your brother and your son leave this world. Allahu Akbar. They had that courage for the sake of Islam. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, she put the bodies, she placed the bodies of the husband, brother and son onto the camel. But the camel did not move and preferred to remain on the battlefield. Seeing this situation, she approached Rasulullah Sallallahu, Alaihi Wasallam about this, and Rasulullah Sallallahu, Alaihi Wasallam asked that if she heard the husband say anything when he was exiting the house. The wife, Hind, who was the wife of Hazrat Amr ibn Jamur radiallahu ta'ala anhu, was asked if she heard the husband say anything when he was leaving the house. And she said, yes, he made the following dua when he was leaving the house, that, oh Allah, do not make me return to my family after the war. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam then said that is the reason that the camel is not moving towards Medina. Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah. The dua of this disabled companion was accepted in the court of Allah, that the camel did not want to move back because his dua was maqbool and accepted. Subhanallah. And that was the reason why the camel was not moving. My fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, it is surely something which we should consider in our lives, that we are Muslims. We can see what the companions have done for Islam. What have we done for Islam? What have we done for Islam? We fail to follow the simplest rules of Islam. We can see that now, we can see how the kuffar had attacked from behind, but this was the disobeying of the command of Rasulullah Sallallahu. How many commands do we disobey? How many? May Allah guide us all. Inshallah, we will continue with what happens further in the battle of Uhud. And surely it is the next part of this chapter is surely a very sad part, which we will discuss and learn in regard to what happens. I ask Allah to forgive me for whatever mistakes I have made during the recitation of the Quran, the translation of the Quran, the narration of the Hadith, taking the names of the companions or mentioning the Seerah. If I have made any mistake, I ask Allah to forgive me. I make tawbah in the court. I make tawbah and ask Allah to accept this tawbah in His court and forgive me for any mistakes. May Allah guide us all to follow the Quran and the Hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May Allah guide us to perform our 5 times Salah with Jama'at. May Allah guide us to sacrifice our time and lives for the sake of Islam. May Allah guide us and grant us the opportunity that when we leave from this world, we leave with the kalima La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. وما توفيقي إلا بالله أستغفر الله وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.